Wouldn't it be wonderful if we could teach the gullible to never be so comfortable with lies they eat like comfort food? To disregard the bogus claims and pseudoscientific claims. Can you imagine just how much indeed the world would change? No more political predators playing on the populace with ilkes and plots to shift and kill metropolis. No more villains with the title in the Bible holding phony temper Bibles like the stuff they teach is vital. Imagine it was normal to have to prove a claim you make. And folks really feel ashamed to express some content that was fake. It's not to say we never make mistakes. It's just to say we go out of our way to show the evidence it takes.
Remain skeptical while you travel the road. The reason stay strapped with logic and fast. That's what it is, yo. Keep reality intact to help the truth grow. Question every claim, especially the ones you believe in. Remain skeptical while you travel the road. The reason.
Welcome to Road to Reason, a skeptic's guide to the 21st century. Today I have the pleasure and honor to be with Dr. Robert Pengzak. Yeah, you.
That's quite the honor. And I got stuck with David tomorrow, but we're going to try to go
Can't
with
win every time. You can't win every time. But today we have a great show. We're going to go back to the basics. We're going to talk a lot about the Skepticism 101 and how that brings us to certain conclusions on certain things. And we're probably going to run out of time. And so perhaps we should start mentioning that this show is put on Roku under the American Atheist TV channel, Atheist TV. And so look us up in there. We get posted in there. We also have Ustream. We also have...
Right, you can check us out live on Ustream. You can look live if you're in the Northern Virginia area on Channel 36. And then we also archive all of our shows if you look up Road to Reason YouTube. So you can catch up with all our old stuff too. And,
old stuff.
Also check us out on the Facebook page. If you enjoy the show, like us. If you have comments or suggestions for guests or topics, please write in. We'll take a look at those and see what we can do.
And I would say that it's probably best to get started on maybe some news.
All right, we'll do a little news first.
Yeah.
So this first piece is from Herb Silverman on Faith Street, where it says, I give 2 cheers for the NBC Wall Street Journal poll that shows Americans would prefer a gay presidential candidate to an evangelical one. For me, that's a twofer, acceptance of gays and discomfort with evangelicals, but I don't yet give it 3 cheers because America would still prefer an evangelical president to an atheist.
Yes, well, I had a friend that came out as atheist to his grandmother, and her comment was, why couldn't you just be gay? So, we still have ways to go, as we know, but we've made a lot of progress lately. And a lot of it, I think, we can see in the news as far as youth being less religious and attending church less, so the number of nuns has certainly grown.
Right, and we can see that 10 years from now, it's probably going to be a completely different political milieu. And for those people that are trying to stick to those evangelical roots, whether they believe them or not, they're just doing because they're trying to buy into the larger audience, they're going to find themselves in a lot of trouble, I suspect.
I worry about that because Robert Ingersoll, back in 1863, said, oh, within 100 years, religion is going to go away. And look, we had the 1980s with the evangelical movement joining politics with the moral majority and all of that.
Right, and we had, though, things were sort of getting better, and then it was a very calculated decision to start the moral majority. It was sort of like money and ideologues said, hey, let's get Jerry Falwell and start this. Reagan adopted the religious right, even though he was, a cowboy and not what a good Christian would have been based on their own mores.
Well, politicians started realizing, again, that religion and politics, you can control people that way very well. Fear in both ends. You see a lot of the news is fear that we're going to be invaded, that our children are in jeopardy, that our kids are going to turn out to be bad people. When in fact, I think today's youth tend to be like some of the coolest people nowadays because they're less racist. They're, they discriminate a lot less. They're more open-minded, and they're certainly a lot more technical.
Right, and you could think how wide open their horizons would be, especially if parents didn't start off by indoctrinating. If we started by educating them, teaching them critical thinking, so they could really blossom to their full potential. And
I want to ask you what critical thinking is in the latter part after the announcement, but maybe we should go to the next.
Well, one more thing from Herb Silverman. Another advance for gays but not atheists is in the Boy Scouts. So that organization is now opening itself up for gays to become scouts and leaders, but atheists still can't be because we're not morally straight.
Well, part of it, so Margaret Downey, she became famous or infamous, depending who you ask, because she went all the way to the Supreme Court that her child wanted to be a Boy Scout, but he was an atheist. And the case was lost. And the reason she was going there, even though it's a private organization, is because they use a lot of the buildings, a lot of government buildings, libraries, and a lot of places that are being paid by everybody's tax dollars. And if you're discriminating against, on based of religion, you shouldn't be getting tax dollars. You shouldn't be getting those benefits. So it's sad to see that they're still doing that. But if they made one step on the gay issue, I'm hoping that in the future they'll go the one last step and make that for the kids that are atheists.
Yeah, so for that inappropriate use, we had something recently where one of my kids was involved in Relay for Life to raise money for cancer, and in the middle of this, what should be a completely secular event, taking care of these families of the people, the departed ones, they ended up having somebody come out and kind of give a sermon, and for those of you that know the Lord's Prayer, you may bow your head and join in, and it was like, first of all, they've got 400 luminaries around a quarter-mile track, so these bags, one testifying to each time that God didn't listen, didn't save the kid, didn't save the wife or the daughter.
I'm sure they didn't see it that way.
Right, and so it's like, how much more proof do you need that this God isn't listening? How about you thank the scientists and the doctors, or you help the grieving families? But it was such an inappropriate, and I guess now being an activist and more aware of it, how they stuck that into the middle of this thing that the public school kids aren't absolutely forced to go to, but they're pretty much told to go to.
Yeah. But it's a captive audience, and so they can't get away from it. And I mean, Freedom from Religion Foundation has taken a lot of schools to court for praying before football games and making everybody stand up, or even doing events that have nothing to do with religion, but there's always a preacher or somebody there ready to extend the prayer, regardless of whether the people that are forced to pray or stand up or pay respect do not believe in that particular religion.
Right, well, and for every Muslim, Jew, Hindu, atheist, agnostic that was sitting there, or if you weren't in that exact sect, it was really divisive. Like, why on earth in the middle of this thing did you just, who approved you sticking this in here?
It's a subtle way of saying you're a second-class citizen. That you have to, this is our place and you are not welcome in it.
And then another funny thing at the end was they also had luminaries up in the bleachers. In the beginning it said hope, and at the end it said cure. And I was like, no, science changes from hope to cure. Faith leaves them in the other luminaries around the track.
That hope doesn't do a lot of curing, All
right, second news thing we're going to talk about.
Yes.
This is by Kimberly Winston. Could rise in atheism translate into a voting bloc with influence in 2016? So the new numbers are out. 22% of Americans, and I guess this is the voting Americans we think, so they say 56 million Americans now are in that none category.
Now just to plug in, of course, as you know, I'm president of Hispanic American Freethinkers, and 56 million Hispanics in the United States. So, those are significant numbers, I can say. No, for us, it's 16% of the population.
Maybe.
Yeah. So, but definitely, it's a big good news. What happened is a lot of the politicians that for now have been pandering to the religious people, all of a sudden they're finding themselves in a, hey, wait a minute, let's do some backpedaling. We've seen that with the gay issue, where it's the question they don't want to answer anymore, especially all the people that run last time, and now those politicians are running this time, and last time they were against gay rights, and now in gay marriage, and now they're being put on the spot and say, hey, what do you think now? And they know that if they now follow the people, as we were talking a little bit before, most politicians tend to follow the people, and we'll talk a little bit about that.
As long as they don't follow the money of the giant corporate interests. Right, the population is there now, and another 10 or 15 years, when this whole young population becomes in the voting public, we're going to really have a mass of either non-believers or people that are very firm about separation of church and
Christian
state,
light.
And they're not going to tolerate the Christian right dominating politics.
Absolutely. Well, I got to tell you, I'm really hopeful for the future. Most old people like me tend to say, oh, in my day we used to barefoot, uphill both sides. Not now. For me it's the opposite. I have, anyone that is, sort of the millennials, anyone, under 15 and between 15 and 30, are people that I see with a great future ahead of them, building a society already in the way they act with each other, far better than what I've seen many generations of the 50s and 70s.
But this assumes that they get active and really take a hand in shaping the future. I guess that's one of the problems.
Apathy.
Is you might have a lot of people that don't buy into the religious stuff now, but unless they get out there and organize and vote or just get involved and know what's going on, they'll just be in the background as politics happens and social policy is made. So you really do have to learn what's going on around you.
Okay. So we have that other piece of news, right?
We got several pieces of news. Which one do you want to jump to here?
They talk about the vote in Ireland.
All right. Well, this one's going to jump us toward our joke of the week if we want to go toward this. So
go ahead.
We'll go over there. All right.
Yeah.
So in Ireland, they recently had a popular vote on whether or not to legalize gay marriage, and it was passed by a whopping 62% majority.
That's amazing.
It is
really amazing.
It's happy time. It's a great advance for humanity.
That's no joke.
Well, it turns out if you're Cardinal Pietro Parolin, the Vatican Secretary of State, considered this a great defeat for humanity, and the only reasonable response to this is for the church to start evangelizing even harder to get their message of hatred across, I suppose.
Oh my goodness. So, when I first heard that, my first question is, okay, tell me how. And, I read the article and I read his speech, and nowhere did I see how is it that this is detrimental to humanity. So it's good to say these things.
So your marriage so far is surviving the fact that gay people in Ireland can get married? Yeah.
I don't know how, but one thing that is very interesting, in the Catholic Church, I think is losing a battle here. Mm-hmm. If you look at the Pope is from Argentina. Well, the Pope fought very hard in 2010 when he wasn't a Pope yet, very hard to be able to stop gay marriage in Argentina. But in 2010, it got voted there. In Spain, it was 25. I'm talking about the countries that are typically considered Catholic. You have Portugal in 2010. You have Brazil in 2013. You have Uruguay and France in 2013 also. So, hearing this is just one more domino, I think, and becoming more normal and more acceptable.
Right. And how long before the Catholic Church claims the leadership role that we knew that gay people deserve better rights, and we've been fighting hard for this for decades?
I wonder how long it took him to realize that eating shrimp was not an abomination, because shrimp uses the same word, abomination, as when it refers to gays, and yet how many times have you seen people protesting outside a Red Lobster restaurant?
Yeah, well, I think Rick calls that the cafeteria Christianity, but for any religion,
which I like,
you pick what you want to follow.
Pick the good stuff, better than picking the bad stuff.
Yeah.
So I like that.
All right. Let's move back to another piece of news. So again, we're going to be talking about critical thinking. So it's really important, on any issue. If your Pope says, hey, gay marriage is terrible, it's going to destroy the world, think about it for yourself. If it doesn't hurt you, maybe you shouldn't be giving your intellectual or moral allegiance to that kind of a leader. Here's another one where climate change denial requires a lot of skepticism. These people in the climate denial machines, which are funded by big oil generally.
I wonder why big oil is funding this denial.
It's hard to see any link. But they try to pass themselves off as climate skeptics. A skeptic, though, is somebody that sort of looks at all the evidence, is open and follows the evidence. A denialist is somebody that starts with their conclusion, no, this climate change isn't real, and then they cherry pick data and they find ways that can sort of kind of support them if people aren't paying attention. So critical thinkers are really disgusted with, anytime a group tries to pass themselves off as skeptics like the climate deniers.
Well, in California, so what are they going to do in California?
So here, it turns out that even though climate change is not acknowledged by most of our leaders, they're having to turn toward a giant desalination plant so they can start using the ocean water because of the persistent drought that mysteriously has come about over all these last years.
Over the past 10 years or so, it's been building up to be that.
Right, and if you read some of the climate science books and look at the graphs, we've just been hit. This has been the hottest decade, and it's the hottest year after
Every
year.
year is hotter than the one before.
Right, and then again, what the denialists will do is if you have a graph that sort of bumps up and down, they'll pick a low point here and the highest point here and say, look, these two are almost level.
The same.
But when you do the statistics, as regular
regression analysis,
right, you see that there's absolutely no doubt about any of this. And again, there's no doubt in the climate science community. The only doubt is coming from the people that are manufacturing doubt, and we'll talk about that a little bit later.
All right, well, we have about a minute before we go into our PSA, don't we?
You want to do the person of the week?
Let's do the person of the week.
Okay, we got two persons this week.
A tie?
We have a
How
tie.
could that be?
Well, let's start with, I'm going to start with Daniel Dennett, and then you do.
Okay.
So Daniel Dennett, Who's
Daniel Dennett?
He is a philosopher at Tufts. He's written a bunch of, he was one of the Four Horsemen.
Great admired scientist.
Right, he's with the Caught in the Pulpit. He wrote with Linda Lascola. He's involved with the Clergy Project.
He's been here in our show.
Started. So he was invited to the World Science Festival.
Sounds pretty good.
Right,
the World Science Festival invited him?
A big deal. And he turned it down because it turns out that even though this is chaired by Brian Greene, who's a big string theorist out of Columbia University, right next to Columbia University Hospitals, which has Dr. Oz.
No.
But so Templeton Foundation money goes into the World Science Festival, and basically that's money left by a billionaire who's decided to try to muddy all the waters possible and make it look like science and religion really don't have any conflicts.
That science supports religion.
Right, or that's completely compatible with it.
Yes.
They don't make different claims, they don't have different approaches, there's no reason not to believe in both of them.
Progress in science is progress in religion.
Well, it doesn't exactly pan.
In their book.
But anyway.
How much money does the Templeton...
So I think it was a $1.5 billion endowment that they left, and they fund $70 million a year into attempting scientists to do this kind of research that happens to...
Now, could it be that there are some scientists that don't know that this group is funding their science?
It's hard to say. There's certainly lots of people that read articles that have no idea that the Templeton Foundation was behind it. Just like innocent people go on the internet, look up climate change, see all this denial stuff, and say, oh, maybe it's not real.
And I've heard a couple of scientists say, look, I really don't care where the money's coming from, so long as I'm allowed to do the research that I want to do, and so long as they don't change my results, and they're not changing my results. But, that's...
This was the same tack that the big tobacco took when they were they realized they needed to bring in a whole cadre of scientists,
experts,
broadly fund research in a bunch of different areas with the understanding, you do good for us, and then they could pull in stuff without directly bribing scientists, and it worked.
I still remember having some ads on TV saying, look, less stress in your life makes you live longer. If you smoke, that relaxes you, therefore you can live longer by smoking. Makes perfect sense, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Perfect science.
Perfect science. And 6 million people a year still die from cigarettes long after we've known the problem. Who's our second person of the week?
Our second person is Stephanie Guttormson. Hey, I nailed that last name. She was here a few shows ago, and she was sued by Mr. Miller, who is this faith healer, has a clientele, and she went on YouTube and showed very carefully why all this faith healing was really bunk, and copied parts of his videos showing he's claiming this, but this is the truth. He's claiming this, presenting evidence, scientific evidence to show her claim, and he attacked her and said, look, we're going to sue you, I'm going to sue you, and he did. Sued her for infringement of copyrights, for lying, for saying all kinds of things. And,
right, so it started out where the main accusation in the beginning was about the slander or the libel until it became obvious, wait, I'm a charlatan, so I'll just change it to
copyright.
And
then thinking that, Stephanie doesn't have a lot of money. She happens to work almost as a volunteer, in my opinion, for American Atheist, and figuring that, okay, she's going to have to take all the videos, take everything back, and apologize because I'm going to scare her with this lawsuit.
How'd that work?
And she raised in a couple of weeks over $25,000 for her defense, and he backed out, and he took the lawsuit off, and now he's trying to stay as low as possible because now the gig is up.
Right. No, and that's fabulous. I mean, that's really fighting for everybody. When you go against somebody like that, you're making yourself vulnerable, and she stood her ground. And
it's a great example, and I wish more of us had the courage to fight the big guys and the big money, for that kind of harassment. I mean, that's what it is. It's harassment.
Yeah. All right. You want to do a couple announcements, then we'll go to our breaks?
Excellent. A couple of announcements. We have the American Atheist Conference coming up in 2 months, the regional American Atheist Conference in Puerto Rico. It's going to be a lot of fun. Now, at least in Facebook, we already have about 500 people, 590 people that said that they're going to go. From most parts of the United States, it's only a few $100s to get there, so it's not really that prohibitive. And the people there are super friendly. So I highly recommend that that you can go there and enjoy the conversation. It's going to be good. Matt Delahunt is going to be there. Well, I'm not going to go through a list. There's a whole list of people that are going to be there. So I highly recommend anyone with spare weekend to just go there for the weekend. Promise you'll have a great time. Okay. And I think that's the only announcement I had. We already mentioned about Atheist TV and to watch us there. So.
And then, next week you said we're going to be talking about polyamory.
Yes, thank you for reminding me of that. So next week, you and I are together again. Oh, the joy.
It's a rematch.
The joy. We're going to have Janet Hardy, who is the author of the Ethical Slut book. And I almost didn't read the book because of the word slut. but it's basically a book on polyamory, and it touches all the different aspects. It's sort of the guideline, one of the first and most comprehensive books written about polyamory. And a lot of people, at least I know a few people within the secular movement that don't have superstitions or anything, that are very practical and practice polyamory. And this is relationships where you have more than one people living together as husband and wife, and happy. You know,
right. And all consenting and informed from the get-go is probably one of the key parts to remember about this. This is an ethical way to have multiple partners.
And it's right on the title.
Stepping out on your
right on the title, ethical. So, and they're trying to own the word slut, like, you know, we are trying to own, you know, like gays try to own, you know, own the word gay. Used to mean happy.
Right. A lot of groups have tried to reclaim words that are used to tarnish them by, you know, Rush Limbaugh.
All right. Well, that's it. Thank you very much. We'll see you after the PSA.
A continued relaxation in the Catholic Church's position on divorce and homosexuality is evident in Germany's branch of the Church, where bishops have voted to allow lay workers in its hospitals, schools, and other social services to remain employed even if they have divorced or are in a homosexual relationship. The German bishops seem to be taking the lead in this trend, which is gradually taking place around the world in response to Pope Francis's statement on the subjects. A worldwide synod of bishops at the Vatican was split last October on the topics, but another such meeting this coming October could move the needle on the matter. Even in Germany, the feeling is not unanimous, though as almost a third of the diocese is still opposed to such leniency. One problem the Church has is with respect to German laws, which in the case of commercial organizations would take a dim view of dismissing someone for their sexual views or marital arrangements. Such clashes between civil laws concerning employment and the views of religious groups who employ people, even of their own faith, are becoming more common. Pope Francis has made several comments in his 2 years in office indicating that he doesn't expect to be around for too long. He again alluded to his mortality recently when addressing a group of elderly at Rome's seaside parish, telling them that he was a little old and a little sick, and that they should pray for him too. Francis has also implied that he might step down rather than waiting for death to end his papacy, when he said that his predecessor Benedict's move to retire should not be considered an exception, even though it was the first time a pope had retired in 600 years. Pope Francis is 78 years old.
One of the goals of an atheist community is to provide support for those who find themselves without faith in light of mounting evidence against unfounded beliefs. Organizations with this goal range from skeptic groups to humanist service meetups to support groups for those who may have lost a community through their deconversion. In response to this, Recovering from Religion, an organization that seeks to support those who have left their faith, has recently launched the Hotline Project. This is not a deconversion hotline. The motive behind the project is to support a growing population of people who have left their faith and need to construct their identities around a new, beautiful reality. If you want more information, you can visit the Recovering from Religion website at recoveringfromreligion.org.
This is Richard Dawkins. Doing commercials is unfamiliar territory for me, but I'm inviting you to watch Road to Reason, a skeptic's guide to the 21st century, on Fairfax Public Access every Sunday. Each week the hosts tackle wishful thinking, religion, pseudoscience, and the harm they cause, with a combination of facts, humor, and community involvement. They challenge believers to defend their faith and give you, the skeptic, a voice. With live call-ins for viewers and streaming on the World Wide Web, there's never a dull moment. Don't wait. Look at them now on Facebook and YouTube And remember to watch Road to Reason, A Skeptic's Guide to the 21st Century, or there'll be hell to pay.
Looks like it's done.
Don't let salmonella get funky with your chicken. On average, 1 in 6 Americans will get a foodborne illness this year. You can't see these microbes, but they might be there. So learn the right temperature to cook each type of meat. Keep your family safe at foodsafety.gov.
Body language can tell you all sorts of things. Like someone is having a stroke. Know the sudden signs. Learn fast. Face drooping, arm weakness, speech difficulty. Time to call 911 and get them to a hospital immediately. Learn the body language and spot a stroke fast.
Why is Connor having trouble focusing in school?
Having trouble finding Connor's middle school? Would you like directions?
No, why is Connor having trouble focusing in school?
Finding lowest airfare to Istanbul.
No, I'm tired of fighting with him over homework.
Home, walk, restaurant. Need a review?
No, I need help. He's very smart, but his mind wanders. He's disorganized.
I think I understand.
Oh, good.
French fries. Finding best potatoes.
No!
Russet. Fingerling. Yukon Gold.
Why don't you understand me?
Sorry, I was trying to show how Connor feels every day. Frustrating, isn't it? Redirecting to understood.org.
For the 1 in 5 kids with learning and attention issues, this is what life can feel like. Explore understood.org, a free online resource about learning and attention issues, designed to help your child thrive in school and in life. Understood.org, because understanding is everything.
Welcome back to Road to Reason, A Skeptic's Guide to the 21st Century. You know, I always enjoy those PSAs. They're always so cleverly done.
The last one was good. I like that.
I liked it. So today I want to ask you a question. I want to start by, how do we know what is real and what is not real? What is true versus what is false? How can I determine that I'm actually talking to you and not having a nightmare?
That was a compliment, right? Can we cut that out, crew? No, it's really a good question, because first of all, anything that we take in through our senses is immediately processed by our brains, and so we're not like a tape recorder getting an objective view of reality. And we have lots of biases, and our brains don't operate as truth ascertaining machines. So the method that we use to get at the truth turns out to be science. And that's something that really gets rid of our own biased ways that we tend to see things and tries to find objective reality.
So do we now live, so science hasn't been around forever. Do we now live in a world where, where we know the world better than we did, say, 1,000 years ago?
Yeah, we actually understand things vastly better than before. And it's really interesting that for the first many thousands of years of civilization, or if you go back before then, of just evolution, we didn't make a whole lot of progress in terms of understanding the world. And people could just do like armchair philosophy and just say whatever seemed reasonable. And if it seemed reasonable, they might get an audience and a following that agreed with it. But until you go back and compare that with some empirical, see what the world is saying, you can say whatever you want.
But there are a lot of people today that are not, that have never taken a science class or haven't taken a lot of science. They took, grade school, a couple of classes in 3rd grade, whatever. Are those people doing science? Can they do science? They get around in our modern world today. So how are they doing it without science per se, or are they doing science and not knowing about it?
Well, there's a few things. First of all, science doesn't have to be tricky or complicated. Anybody can and should learn, first of all, the scientific method and kind of how everything works, and you can learn the things that you're interested in. A separate thing is one of the products of science can be technology. So you don't have to understand how a cell phone works and how things bounce off a satellite to actually just use it. But a separate thing is everybody should learn sort of critical thinking and science skills enough so they can evaluate.
Okay, so let's backtrack a little. You mentioned earlier critical thinking. How would you define critical thinking? I mean, how does someone know if they're doing critical thinking or not? So in your opinion, what is critical thinking?
If you disagree with me, no. Critical thinking is really going into everything with a healthy dose of skepticism and looking to see what the evidence shows.
You just keep using words. Now, what is skepticism?
So, well, skepticism There's actually a philosophy of skepticism, which I hope you'll know. I'm going to get lost in that.
We're talking down to earth, you know.
Yeah, but so it's just
for your average person.
Not taking everything at face value. So if somebody comes on TV and says, I have this great product that's going to regrow your hair, maybe it's true, maybe it's not, but you should be skeptical. You say, okay, well, how does it work? How long have they known about it? How come you're the only one that's ever advertised this product? And you just now, and it may be that they have all the research evidence and it all holds together, and you go and you look into it and it's true, and that's fine. So a skeptic is not a denialist. It doesn't mean that no matter what evidence comes, you're just not going to believe it. A skeptic means you look into the facts.
It seems like being a skeptic means you don't necessarily have to accept everything as presented to you. So if someone says, hey, this toothbrush is really good for you, you could question things. Right?
Right, and it's a good thing. It's not nasty. Like, people have this view that being skeptical towards religion is appalling. How dare you question it?
Some people confuse being a cynic with being a skeptic.
That's right. That's a great point.
And a cynic is, someone that is all negative about everything and just contrarian and just even when there's overwhelming evidence, say, no, I don't want to be part of the crowd. I don't want to be part of the people that accept that this is the way it is. So I'm going to go opposite. Period. Sounds like many of our voters in this country, independent voters in this country, they seem to vote for whoever's not in power that year.
Yeah, no, and skepticism you should really see is a very positive thing. Again, so Jerry Coyne has a new book, Faith versus Fact, Why Science and Religion Are Incompatible. I'm about a quarter of the way through it. It's a great book, and he does talk about how when he, I think, first began his PhD program, it was a little scary. It's like, wow, this is overwhelmingly negative. Everything these smart people say gets torn apart by 20 other guys in this program. And you have to develop a thick skin in science and realize these aren't personal attacks on you. This is how science works. You present a hypothesis, you show the supporting evidence, you show the studies that were done, how they were done, and then all these other people that have studied this and are really equipped to pick it apart listen to you and say, well, what about this, this, and this? And if it survives the process, then that hypothesis can slowly get elevated toward a theory. And if something is wrong with it, if somebody brings up a point, you don't have to feel ashamed, and I screwed up, and I'm stupid, I'm leaving. It's like, oh, that's a good point. We need to redo that part of the study this way to look into that. That's a good, valid point. That's how science should work.
Yeah, so what I see fairly often is that if you go ask anybody in the street and say, hey, do you believe in anything that is false? Most likely they're going to say, nah, of course, everything that I believe is right, even though they might believe in energy rocks and in other stuff that some others would consider not be, So how do we, well, first of all, you said, the other thing is you said scientific method. That puts a scary thing because scientific, I'm not a scientist, but, right. We often hear politicians saying that. But you have, so I wanted to mention the steps that we're talking about here when we say scientific method. Don't call it scientific method. Call it the way of thinking right. And so, and I'll read it just to make sure I don't make it. Is you first make an observation. You look at something, you say, huh, that's interesting. I wonder if, and then you form a hypothesis. Now, what's the difference between a hypothesis and a theory?
Well, 2 points. First, I want to say that it's good to go through the steps. There are several. I like to think of it more as a circle because it turns out you can really enter the scientific method or process anywhere as long as you go through the steps. So now a hypothesis is sort of like an educated guess, but it also has to be testable and falsifiable. So if you come up with something that nobody could ever invalidate, if you're God is invisible and gives off no heat and can't be detected and can't whatever, it's now outside, right? You're doing everything you can to make sure science can't touch it.
Yeah, I believe in God. God is real, but he doesn't make his presence known or seen and testable, and therefore...
Right, or Bigfoot is real, but he always hides, or he can turn invisible. There's all sorts. You can do this with anything you want.
So it sounds like a good question to ask anyone about anything, whether it's unicorns or anything, is to say, well, what is the difference between the characteristics of your being, whatever that being is, and imagination, and an imaginary being? So one way perhaps is to try to determine what is imaginary, and what's not, but saying, okay, if this was imaginary, would I still have the same features, the same characteristics? If my dragon was real, would that dragon, still be not visible and have all the things that an imaginary dragon would have? And I think that's a good first step in questioning everything.
Right, and it's not an insult. Again, if you ever ask a scientist, Yeah, I'm not sure about that. Why do you say that? They're not going to be irritated.
They'd be flattered.
They're going to be flattered and thrilled that, wait, this person's taking interest, they want to learn, and they love to teach. And science is not a black box. Science is absolutely wide open. They'll show you their methods.
It's for everybody.
Right, it's for absolutely everybody, and it doesn't have to be intimidating. And it shouldn't be. It should really be early.
In fact, I would say that in the tools that we're talking about today, one that should raise a big flag is if you ever ask somebody to explain something or give you the details or why this or explain that or how, and you feel pushback, you feel that they're being negative, that they don't want to answer, that they feel insulted, that should be a huge flag that, that something is wrong. Because science and truth and reality loves to be questioned.
Right, for instance, if you asked a faith healer, this is amazing, medicine has failed to solve these things for decades, how do you do this? That shouldn't be an insult if that faith healer is really doing something. The reason you'll get the defensiveness and pushback is it's a lot of quackery and it doesn't work, and they don't want that exposed.
And you will see that fairly often on anything that is supernatural. When you start questioning the supernatural, and even when you question individuals. So I'll use it as an example, heaven. You will walk to any person that believes in heaven, and you sit them down with a cup of coffee and say, let's talk about heaven. Explain heaven. Am I going to be there with everyone in the family? And, oh yes, everyone you love. And what about the ones that I didn't love so much? Uncle Joe Hughes, I hated him. What about, that nose job that I did? Am I going to have my old nose or my new nose? You start thinking about it. What are you going to do the first 100 million years that you're in there? And then what are you going to do the second 100 million years? And so on. It becomes really, you start seeing that heaven starts turning more like into a hell. And are you allowed to kill yourself in heaven if you want to? So.
And also, to the degree that people really believe in heaven and angels and all that stuff, these questions shouldn't be embarrassing. They shouldn't be defensive. If you
they should be eager to talk about it.
Right. You should be eager and happy to explain how you came by that knowledge.
And yet, fairly often, when you start asking these kinds of questions to people, whether it's about the chupacabra or about the energy rocks, or you're talking about unicorns or anything else that they may believe in, once you start, a lot of people take it as a personal offense. You're questioning my beliefs. You're questioning my God. You're questioning my thing. So how do you deal with people to say, look, a lot of people say you're lacking, you're not, you're irrespecting me. You're
just disrespecting.
That's the word. You're disrespecting by asking. Asking something is not a lack of respect, is it?
No.
So
it's showing an interest in it, and that you respect them enough intellectually to say, well, you must have some reason for having come to this. I'm interested in that field too. Explain it to me.
Now, are there certain ideas that should not be that should be respected?
Well, people can have respect. Ideas have to stand or fall on their own merit.
So respect the people. You don't have to respect the ideas.
Right, and you're not, just by bringing up something that you don't agree with a certain person doesn't mean you hate them or you dismiss them or you're trying to marginalize them. You're trying to see how they came by their beliefs, and it's important that we align. If you think that it's important to align our beliefs with reality, how do you feel on that? What's the downside of believing in things that aren't real?
Well, my belief is what I like to say is repeat what Matt Dillahunty says fairly often. I like to believe in as many true things and as few false things as possible because, I have a short life, and I think life is better if we live in a real world than in a fantasy world. Now, that brings us to the question. So what if I have wrong beliefs? Or why is it important that somebody else, why should we care that somebody else believes whatever they want to believe?
Mm-hmm. Right, and you had an important point before, is that we all get one vote. At least, take aside Citizens United, which gives some wealthy people lots and lots of voting power. But if somebody bases their vote on a single issue and they base their desire of how that issue is answered on a holy book from 2,000 years ago, that becomes my problem or my kid's problem down the road. So we really need everybody to be informed. If we're all going to live in a society under a group of shared rules, we want to make sure that those rules are reached by good, thoughtful processes. And so if people are believing in magical things that don't exist, we're going to have some bad rules based on that.
Well, and that brought us to the news. The reason we're having this problem in California is because although the science for many, many years has been saying that we're having global climate change in different parts of the country, in different parts of the world, and that is going to negatively affect a lot of people who have relied for decades or centuries on a particular type of climate, and when that climate changes, it will affect crops, it'll affect rainfall, it'll affect all these things, and yet they have refused to say. Why haven't people seen those things in California?
Yeah. And this is threatening civilization at some point. I doubt that humanity itself will be wiped out, but over 99% of species have gone extinct. Yeah. And every mega civilization that you look at eventually got wiped out. So the idea that things will just continue to work themselves out if we just drift along, right, that we're special, like America, it's going to be a disaster. And it's not going to be the Koch brothers' disaster. It's going to be our kids and grandkids and great-grandkids.
So, that brings me up to another question is, when you see something going sort of in the wrong direction, illogically, shouldn't we be asking why? Why is this happening? What's behind this? Mm-hmm. Are the people providing the studies for the cigarettes being healthy? Who are sponsoring those research? That's right. So whoever is doing the research has a bias. Mm-hmm. So how can science get away from the bias?
Yeah. So here I'm going to show a second book. We're just trying to start showing some books that we read that we think are useful. So Merchants of Doubt, how a handful of scientists obscured the truth on issues from tobacco smoke to global warming by, get that on there, Naomi Oreskes and Eric Conway. So this goes through a whole bunch of different issues, including the ozone hole, including global climate change, big tobacco, how you have people with either an ideological interest or a moneyed interest creating think tanks, putting out a few big scientists to then talk in a field that they don't specialize in. That goes against, that's contrarian. It's not that they discovered something original and the whole scientific community says, wow, those guys are geniuses. These guys are the contrarians. These are when you hear about the 1 or 2% of scientists that don't believe in whatever it happens to be, and it always happens to support the big companies that they're working for, that's these guys. And when you have a whole propaganda mill, when you have enough money, you can put out a few contrarian studies, and instead of those getting mentioned one time in the year because they're 1 out of 10,000 studies, when they get mentioned 1,000 times because you have companies paying to promote them, you can suddenly start to sway the public that isn't very scientifically literate. So if we were a country of skeptics, that's where it really becomes important.
To live in a country of skeptics.
Right, and not in a nasty way, but so you hear something, you say, well, where did that come from? Oh, it came from Heartland Institutes. Mm-hmm. Oh, they're funded by big oil. Oh, maybe that's why they're the
John
1 and 2%
Templeton
studies. Or exactly right. So when you get a study showing that science and religion are compatible.
Surely there are exceptions to this. I mean, religion has done a lot of good to a lot of places, or so is the claim, that religion, it has orphanages and sends a lot of Bibles, which must be good for somewhere. Anyway, shouldn't we take religion and faith? Isn't religion good, or should that also be questioned?
Well, if you think that going along with reality...
I'm throwing you really low balls here, right?
Yeah, I'm really bad. If you think that reality is important, then nothing should get a free pass.
Nothing, absolutely nothing should get a free pass.
Okay. All right, we'll finish in a second. We're going to come back to that. You remind me.
Yes.
We have Gary on the phone. Gary, you had a question?
In a free and tolerant society, within certain limitations, of course, you are allowed to have a show like this, and like you were saying earlier, I respectfully, revere your right to believe whatever you want to believe, but
even if what I believe affects you directly, if you, for instance, if I believe that all women that are not a virgin when they get married should be stoned, should I have that right over your own child?
Well, I was the one calling up the question, and now you're diverting my attention.
No, okay, that's okay. I wanted to see, you were making a premise, and I wanted to clarify the premise. You said that you respect all beliefs.
All our actions affect other people.
Okay.
But I wanted to get my question across.
Okay, go ahead.
Your guest mentioned that, alluding back to affecting other people, that a holy book written 2,000 years ago would affect your children's freedom. Okay?
If it's followed.
That hasn't been played out. We'll see. But is not this free society that everybody enjoys, within limitations, of course, based on that holy book? Was not our Constitution with the divine
That's
creator?
A good question. That's a great question. And if I'd like to go first, if that's okay?
Sure. And do you want to tell us your thoughts on that maybe first? Like, do you think that our Constitution was founded on the Bible?
Well, indirectly or directly, yeah.
Okay. So fairly often,
read through the whole thing.
Okay.
Yes, good question. Thank you. Fairly often, what we have is a lot of people say this is a Christian nation. We were born out of faith. Our people came here with the pilgrims and so forth. But when the Constitution was established, if you look in the Constitution, not once does it say the word God, not once does it say Jesus, not once it says we the people, it doesn't say we by divine appointment or anything like that. And it basically, the only 2 times that talks about religion in the Constitution, which is our governing document, it says that there's supposed to be, separation of church and state, that the government is not supposed to push for any particular religion as one, and that there should not be a religious test for running for office. Now, today we have that test implicitly. An atheist cannot get elected to office today. And that is because people want to see religious people against the Constitution. So the people themselves are going against the Constitution, which is fine. We just need to change the Constitution, and we all follow the same rules. So that is, and the second part, as far as our government being Christian, is John Adams did the Treaty of Tripoli in 1810, I think it was, maybe 1805, around there. And in there, very, very specifically, it says, we are not a Christian nation. Right. And this was a letter, a treaty that was signed with Tripoli because we were getting our behinds whipped by people people in Libya thought that we were at war with them.
Right, and I think it was signed by, it was unanimous.
It was
Everybody
unanimous.
in the Senate
Congress,
supported it.
upper house and lower house both signed for it, and it was signed by the president, which was John Adams, and that had started with Thomas Jefferson. So these are the people that actually wrote the document and knew the intent of the document.
Right, and so our founders were all deists. They were Enlightenment thinkers. They took every step they could to make sure that we couldn't be confused as being founded as a Christian nation. And yet a lot of people today either say we were and or truly believe that we were. To the degree that people are a religious apologist and they know the facts and they say it anyway, that's pretty reprehensible. They're misleading people. For everybody else that genuinely thinks, hey, I've heard it in church over and over, we're a Christian nation, our hearts go out to you guys because you're being fed incorrect information from people that you trust who should know better. Well, and that's why everybody needs skepticism.
We're talking about skepticism. We need to look, there's a movement for revisionism of history. And where they're picking certain things, removing certain words. Texas, more recently, they modified the history textbooks to remove Thomas Jefferson from some of the things that he said and put in someone else in there. So the idea here
and whatever Texas does with textbooks affects much of the country.
Because of the volume of books that they buy. They're big state. So that becomes very, very critical. And having, our founders, our founding fathers knew very well, they were very aware that of the problems that when you have religion and you had politics together, government together, they had, you had the Inquisition and you had the Dark Ages and you had all this, where basically it's really a bad combination. And if we want to be free for all religions in this country and accepting of all religions, which we're for, everybody should have a stake. So swing your arms, as long as you don't hit somebody else, to me, is usually my way of thinking of it.
All right, so Gary, first of all, does any of that affect you? Is there anything that you would go and read and see if you get a different opinion? And do you have a follow-up question that you wanted to go with?
Oh, yeah, I just wanted to kind of counter with, in the Declaration of Independence, it does say endowed by their creator.
Yes, but...
Okay. And in the Constitution, it does not say the separation of church and state.
Yeah. So
but what it does say is freedom of religion, but not freedom from religion.
So on the Declaration of, on the Declaration of Independence, that document is not a governing document for our nation. The Constitution is what governs this nation. The Declaration of Independence was a severance document that was written in a language so that the king would understand and trying to, because remember, those kings were appointed by divinity. They were divinely appointed, and so they wrote it in a language that the king, hopefully the king would understand. Of course, the king said they could have written it in any language. He was going to reject it. And I'm sorry, what was the second part?
Well, the second part was, again, that didn't say Jesus. It would have been incredibly easy anywhere in that entire document if our founders wanted us founded as a Christian nation there was no reason to make it ambiguous. Well, so they were deists. They did believe in some kind of divinity.
The other part was in that the Constitution doesn't say that there should be a separation of church and state, but the person that wrote that document, along with Madison and some others, Thomas Jefferson, did write a letter where he used specifically those words. So there's very clear intention as what it was meant, because the guy that actually wrote it in a private letter to a minister, to a religious person, said, we need to have this separation of church and state.
Right, so the letter to the Dansbury Baptist, and it was absolutely clear.
Exactly. So we have to take things in context. I'm not saying that the government should be against religion. It should not be involved in religion at all whatsoever, and it is. I mean, we have the Pledge of Allegiance that has, one nation under God, and well, that doesn't apply to a lot of us that don't believe in deities. You have also in God we trust in the currency, which of course it's false, because we, meaning the we people in the United States, not all of us believe in God, and so therefore we don't trust such a God.
Right, and so if adults of their own volition want to go to church, get together with like-minded people and pray, we have absolutely no problem with that. It's when you start dictating. First of all, I think taking 2-year-olds and indoctrinating them is a real problem because it stunts that child's intellectual development. We should teach them critical thinking, and when they're, come of legal age or age of reason, if they then choose to go into religion, that's perfectly fine. You'll notice that religions very specifically don't do that, right? There's the famous quote, give me the boy and I'll give you the man. Gary, did you have anything else?
It's been a pleasure talking to you, and
no, we really appreciate your call. We really appreciate your call. I hope you call again in the future.
Oh yeah, it's quite interesting to me because for me, it's kind of reverting back to the idea that is very much mouthed today. How like the old the question is, if I point my finger at you and start judging you, I have 3 pointing back, right?
Yes, and I think it's fair enough. I think that if we criticize religion, we should all be criticizing each other because it's the way to grow, it's the way to improve when we see, otherwise we start convincing ourselves that we're really good when in fact, or that we have certain knowledge when in fact we don't have such knowledge. A lot of religions, all of religions make claims about nature, about gods, about angels, about all kinds of things, where in fact we have ignorance because we have no really way of testing those things.
I'm just curious, do you mind if I ask you a question?
No, sure, go ahead, but I do want to comment real quick before you ask your question.
Okay.
I like what you really said at the beginning of the show about how do we really know what is true, because I would like to believe as many true things and to come out of the denial of the wrong thinking.
On anything.
I would agree on that and compliment you on that statement.
On everything. And that should be the motto for every kid, in school is, have them try to believe and find out on their own. I tell people, don't trust what I say. Don't believe anything that I say. Go check it out.
Right, take that as a starting point and go do your research.
Yeah.
So how do you have any feelings toward atheists, positive, negative? Does this, show fit with your expectations?
Right. Well, part of the free thinking of the tolerance in society is if you want to be an atheist, say so and do it. Just like I'm a believer, but there's 2 of you and there's 1 of me, so I'm not throwing any condemnation at any one of you, but just having a good, honest conversation.
Gary, what's your definition of an atheist?
Well, somebody that insists there is no God, where an agnostic would say, well, I honestly don't know.
Excellent that you said that, because that kind of brings me to the other point that I wanted to make on the definition of atheism. Yeah. There are 2 types of atheists. There's what is called the hard atheist and the soft atheist. The hard atheist is the one that says God does not exist. The problem with that is that if anytime you make a claim, either God does not exist or God exists, then it's up to you to prove your claim. Right. But the soft atheist, I'm one of them. The soft atheist is one that says, I don't believe in God because I haven't seen any evidence for it. But as soon as I do have the evidence, then I'm willing to believe. So I call myself a skeptic atheist. I'm sorry, an atheist agnostic. Now, agnostic atheism talks about faith. So if I ask somebody, do you have faith and do you believe in a God? If the answer is no, then you're an atheist. If your answer is yes, then you are a believer. But there's also believer agnostic and believer and atheist agnostic. A believer agnostic is one that says, I believe in God, but I really don't know if there is one. and the atheist agnostic says, I don't believe in God and I don't know if there is one. The idea is, if you know, for me and for a lot of atheists, we leave the door open for anything. I mean, as open as we leave it for unicorns, for fairies, for leprechauns, or anything else.
And I think that's an important point to make, because I guess I would consider myself more of a hard atheist from your definition, that the only degree that I believe in God is to the exact same degree that I believe in all these other things that I do not believe in, like Santa Claus and unicorns.
But if tomorrow somebody shows you evidence for unicorns.
Yes, and that is the difference, that in hopefully science and skepticism in general, you're always open to the evidence. And if, you know, it seems incredibly unlikely after all these years that God was hiding and now is going to reveal himself. But you're right, if new evidence for anything that I didn't believe in came up, the great thing about just being skeptical is you're not married to that decision. You're hopefully married to the process. I looked at the evidence as best I could at that point. I came to what seemed the most rational decision. There's now new evidence. It doesn't mean you're a waffler or a flip-flopper. It means you're being skeptical. You're looking at the evidence and deciding.
In politics, that's bad. They call you a flip-flopper. But I got it. So
that's good.
Okay, yeah. I'll say one last thing to that is I was 42 years old 9 years ago when I became an atheist. And that's an old guy changing his mind about, you know, belief in deity. So anyway, thank you, Gary. Really.
I had one other question, if that's okay.
Okay.
Well, we have about 2.5 minutes. So go ahead and actually ask your question real fast.
Where did Memorial Day start? Thank you for listening.
Thank you. You know, I don't know. Memorial Day, I don't know when it started. When it became a holiday, I don't know.
No, but I would also say that one thing with critical thinking and skepticism and anything, if you don't know something, you don't have to be ashamed. This is something that you'll see politicians and lots of people just make stuff up. There's all sorts of information that we don't know.
And I am going to find out.
Yeah, and that's another good thing, is if you don't know something someone brings up, look it up, find out about it.
And yes, now a lot of some people have said, well, if you're an atheist, you don't believe in anything. And we believe in plenty of things. I believe in love, I believe in justice, I believe in helping others, I believe in making a better world than we currently have. So there's plenty of stuff, and I mean, there's the saying, there isn't anything that you can do with religion that you cannot do without religion.
Right, and there's, you know, you had said something that we got sidetracked a little about, doesn't religion do lots of good things? And religious people certainly do all sorts of wonderful, charitable, humanitarian projects, but they could also do that without religion. It's not the religion that made them do that. It's being a social primate who tries to get along with other people. Now, religion can be a motivating factor, and there's some discussion in the atheist community, do we need something like that, some kind of community building thing?
Some atheist church kind of thing. But yeah, I mean, religion does a lot of good, but remember, right now, Jehovah's Witnesses cannot get blood transfusions, so a lot of kids have been put at risk. Christian Science, they don't go to doctors at all. That makes it very difficult. You see all the honor killings that are done by other religions. You see the laws in Uganda against homosexuals, you know, where they're killed and with machetes.
And I think that started with an American group going there and proselytizing this stuff.
AIDS, the Catholic Church, and AIDS in Africa. We've had, you know, people dying there with AIDS, and I mean, we can go on and on and on.
And so, to look at the hypocrisy, there we were doing this wonderful stuff, but if they would not accept our abstinence-only, Christianity-based method of contraception, we're going to cut off their AIDS funding. Where is God in that whole picture? And, you know, again, so it matters.
The mercy.
The less skeptical people we have, the more George Bushes will get running office as evangelicals. Thank you so much for joining us. We'll see you next week.
See you next week. Thank you.